Before we start the episode, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Because of the coronavirus, we are going to be running 2 episodes per week instead of 3 episodes per week. Therefore, you can expect episodes every Monday and Thursday until the pandemic is over and football is back. Just to reiterate one more time, upcoming episodes will be released every Monday and Thursday and not every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I think in the end, this will be to your benefit as we'll have a little bit of extra time to focus on each episode. Now to today's episode. I'm Josh Schneiderweiler, coming up on Football Today.
And Mohamed Salah now. Ronaldo. Well, in some style, Ederson prevents a goal. And maybe a chance now for Liverpool from this corner.
Liverpool versus Manchester City. A month ago, it looked like this game, which was scheduled for this weekend, might be the game Liverpool were crowned champions of England. Now, it's being played out virtually on PlayStations, Xboxes, and computers around the world. As the football industry slumbers in quarantine, players, coaches, and fans are all flocking to FIFA and other video games to escape the cold reality. So in today's episode, we ask, how are leagues and clubs leveraging video games and esports to fill the footballing void?
I've been playing a game called Super Soccer, which is a Super Nintendo game from way back in the day.
Noah Davis is a freelance football writer and regular contributor to ESPN.com.
I've played a little bit of FIFA, but I'm very, very bad at it and don't have the commitment. So Super Soccer for my Nintendo Switch has been where I've been going, and I have to say I've been getting pretty good at it.
Super Soccer. Can you actually talk a little bit about that? Because I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I used to play growing up with friends, and it's an early Super Nintendo game. It's just 11 on 11, and there's 16 teams, and you just sort of play through the World Cup. And I started with playing with the U.S., and they were just not good enough, so I had to go to Germany, who they're the best team in the game. And then actually Belgium is the worst team in the game, which I thought was kind of funny. It shows how well the Belgians have progressed since, the mid-90s, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Before we go a little bit further into our conversation, I think we should define what esports is, versus maybe video games. Can you quickly define esports?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the simplest way is esports, is video games that people are watching them play on a competitive level. And it's multiplayer, it's 1v1 or it's 4v4, you have esport teams, but it's really the professionalization of video games. And there's a couple different kinds of esports. There's sort of the traditional sports like American football, soccer, football, so the Madden and the FIFAs of the world, and that's the traditional sports that are taken to a video game level and played. And then there's games like Overwatch and Fortnite, which are video games. Those have been professionalized, and you have Overwatch teams, and you have people play, you get 4 Overwatch players against 4 other Overwatch players, and they play in these big stadiums.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barclays Center, and welcome to the Overwatch League Grand Finals.
Thousands of fans come and watch, so that's sort of a different level as well.
You recently wrote a piece on esports in ESPN, and in that piece, you talked about how MLS is kind of using esports and FIFA. Can you talk about how they're using it in this time where the league is suspended?
Yeah, I think if you pull back a little bit, a couple years ago, MLS has really made a big investment in the FIFA in esports because, MLS, their fan base is younger. That's sort of always been the promise of soccer in the US is a young fan base. And they're interested in video games, they're interested in esports, they're interested in FIFA. And so for the last 2 or 3 years, starting in 2018, MLS has had a thing called the EMLS Cup, where MLS teams actually sponsor professional FIFA players. Each team has one, not every team, but most teams have one, and then they play each other, and the winner is the EMLS champion.
And that is it! Dual Star is your 2019 EMLS Cup champion. Closes out the 3.
With this stoppage of global football, obviously there's no live on field games. So MLS has really tapped into these esport players to start producing content. Their esport players are playing each other. I talked to a guy whose esport name is Dulsa. It's Cormac Dooley. He was originally the Philadelphia Union's esport player and then went to Nashville, which is an expansion franchise. And, he played a 2-match series with the Columbus Crews esport player, and Dulsa won, and he was very happy about that. But, it's just a way for fans to watch their teams play in a competitive environment without games happening on the field. They've also had professional outdoor football players have been playing each other. So, a guy from Sporting Kansas City and a guy from Real Salt Lake played each other. Inter Miami, which is an expansion franchise, had a 4-player tournament where they all played each other. And, there's some smack talking, and on the streams, you have the game going on, but you also have a little inset of the players so they can talk, and then the fans can watch on Twitch or on Twitter, and they can interact. So there's just kind of a lot of different ways that MLS teams are trying to keep the fans engaged, keep them entertained, and keep producing content, for lack of a better word, when there is no outdoor traditional sports going on.
For the story, you spoke to a marketing executive from the New England Revolution, Cathal Conlon. What did he say about the league using esports in this time period?
He said that what they need to do and what their responsibility is during this very strange and scary time. There were 2 fronts. One was to help use their social media channels to get out the messages of the CDC and the World Health Organization and the safety messages and all of that. And I think they've done a good job with that. Some of their players have done PSAs that they put out on Twitter. So the first part was that educational angle. And then the second part was, what do we do as a soccer club? And what we do as a soccer club is, as simple as it sounds, is we put on football matches and we keep our fans entertained. And so Cathal and his team, their goals are really with esports and with all of the content that they're producing is really to give fans an opportunity to have a distraction, and if they want it during this time, and to provide some entertainment. And esports is one way to do that. They've also been doing streams of their games. So a couple weeks ago, the Revolution were scheduled to play the Portland Timbers. And the Revolution and the Timbers got together, and they actually put that game on FIFA, and they streamed that game. They weren't esports players, so no one was playing, but it was just a simulation on FIFA of that game. And Cathal's point was, look, our Revolution fans, they had planned on, I forget what the day was, but it was March 16th. They had planned at 4 p.m. to be watching the Revolution play Portland, whether that was going to Gillette Stadium or watching it on TV or getting together with their friends. And they couldn't do that because, of the stay-in-place orders and everything that's going on. But we, as an organization, can give them a 2-hour period where, if they would like to, they can watch that game and have some semblance of that experience. So I think that's their goal, is to be able to, provide a little bit of normalcy and a little bit of entertainment in a very scary and strange time.
You've alluded to how MLS, takes esports seriously, and this is the 3rd season they've had the EMLS Cup, which was actually canceled. It was supposed to be at South by Southwest in Austin. Just how close is that relationship with esports? Just how big is it?
It's getting closer every year. As MLS, as the league grows, their esports presence grows. 3 or 4 years ago, there were 0 esports pros in MLS, and now there are 24 of the 26 clubs have an esports team, including Austin FC that doesn't even exist yet. They don't have an outdoor team, but they have an esports pro. So it's getting bigger. The EMLS Cup in 2019, they had 1.1 million streams on Twitch, which is pretty big. I mean, that's, it's 1 million people watching esports, watching FIFA, which is amazing. That significantly outpaces the television audience for an MLS game on ESPN. 65% of MLS fans, said that gaming helped them become fans of soccer. So, I think it's a pretty tightly linked connection between fans of MLS and fans of gaming and fans of esports and fans of FIFA.
Do you expect there to be more esports events while MLS is suspended or things of that nature?
I think so, for sure. Yeah, I think all of the teams and the league are trying to figure out exactly what to do. I don't know if we're going to see very formal. I think we would definitely see formal tournaments pop up. I don't know how. I don't think that EMLS Cup is going to happen, because I think part of the attraction of that is the in-person experience of it as well. It was going to be at South by Southwest, as you mentioned earlier. So I don't think that we're going to see sort of that large scale thing happen, although we might. But I do think that we're definitely going to keep seeing, these games between different esports pros of different teams. And I think also we're going to start seeing the players on the outdoor football teams, they're going to be playing each other more. I think we're going to be seeing 2-on-2 matches where an esports pro from Nashville and a player from Nashville play an esports pro from the Portland Timbers and a player from the Portland Timbers. So I think we're definitely going to be seeing that. I think we're also going to be seeing more kind of streaming of games that have been played. I know a couple earlier this week, Sporting Kansas City live streamed one of their early season games where they beat the Houston Dynamo 4-0. This was, a traditional MLS, and they had 4 of their players, including Matt Biesler, talk through the action and do some commentating.
I think he does a really good job checking off the back line, and he checks off a lot farther than most guys. And so it took us a while to kind of get used to that. But he does a good job of coming back.
And then Benny Feilhaber and Chris Pontius, who are 2 former MLS players, they talked about the first El Tráfico, which was the LAFC Los Angeles Galaxy game, where Zlatan Ibrahimovic came in and, it was his first game and he was just unbelievable. So I think we're going to start seeing that stuff as well, where players, traditional outdoor players, talk about big games, big matches, stuff that happened this season, stuff that happened last season, talk through MLS Cups who are there. So I think we're going to see that, and then we're going to see a lot more EMLS stuff as well.
So we just spoke with Noah Davis about how MLS is using esports to fill in for their suspended season. How is the rest of the football world embracing esports?
Well, it's been quite crazy, really.
Alastair Pusinelli is the editor-in-chief of RealSport101.com, a website dedicated to esports and video games.
I work for the company that owns Real Sport, who I'm editor-in-chief for. Gfinity, they host tournaments, so we were having meetings about what we were going to do and things like that. But you could already start to see the trends. So Football Manager, the game that I'm sure a lot of your listeners have played over the years, they got record traffic of people concurrently playing their game, with the online betting guide suggesting that they had over 180,000 users online on March 22nd. What the team at Sports Interactive have done, they made the game free to play for 2 weeks, and that got loads of people playing, and incentive that if you started your save, you just got to buy the game after those 2 weeks and carry on. I've had a go myself. I managed to get to the Champions League final with Chelsea in season 1. Did the obvious signing of bringing in Erling Haaland up front. He was doing right for me.
Of course, yes.
And in terms, I think the big game that everyone would look to is what's FIFA 20 doing. They're sort of powerhouses in the sporting game field, and it was surprisingly Leyton Orient who were the first team to make tracks, I think a day or two after these games were being cancelled. Leyton Orient are sponsored by the Sun's gaming/sports division called Dream Team, and so they teamed up to launch this FIFA tournament called the Ultimate Quarantine. And yeah, the interest was mad. Teams from Portsmouth to Roma, Feyenoord and RB Salzburg were getting involved, and there's 128 teams now involved. So it's pretty mad, and it hasn't stopped there with just random esports professionals representing the clubs, with Andros Townsend putting on his Crystal Palace kit and Todd Cantwell for Norwich to compete in this tournament. So I think that's been really great to see.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like one of the big trends is having the players jump into these e-gaming and, esports fixtures, if you will. You mentioned Mikel Antonio and Ryan Sessegnon, but they're not the only ones. Players from all over the world and all over Europe are getting involved in this esports.
Yeah, absolutely. So Spain, La Liga got involved and came up with the idea that they're going to run a tournament, and one of the real players from each of the clubs is going to represent them, with Marco Asensio coming out as the champion for Real Madrid, defeating Legan in the final with over 170,000 people on the live stream, which is pretty crazy. Gareth Bale's organised the tournament. He owns his own esports team. This was called Combat Corona. Dominic Calvert-Lewin of Everton, Luke Shaw, Mason Mount and Kieran Tierney all were involved, with proceeds raised from the tournament going to help the emergency services who are combating this virus. It really is amazing. It's just now, if that was the initial sort of reaction in the first 2 weeks, it'd be interesting to see what brands do now they've got acclimatized to working from home, things like that, if they can go bigger and try and catch a wider community.
So obviously one of the big reasons that video games and esports are popular in this time of coronavirus is that you can be isolated and still play. Are there any other reasons, though, that you think esports is kind of having a moment right now?
I think one is that people are quite limited to what they are able to do. And I think one part of it is probably escapism. People are getting pretty down with all the news at the moment. Is more deaths, more people contracting this. And I think esports and gaming lets you plug into something and it will take you somewhere else. And for sports fans, that you kind of forget at times that you're playing a game or whatever. You're so ingrained in it. You're just playing it for what it is. And I think just having that ability to take people away from what's going on around them is why I think that gaming and esports communities are like, they have such a cult following because everyone's so passionate about them. They share the same beliefs, and it's almost as if people outside of that don't really get it. Whereas I think now, with more people turning into gaming and esports, it's probably allowing them to see what the sort of big deal is about it.
Yeah, and it's also kind of everyone is a gamer at heart if you're competitive, right? People just love to play games and be competitive, and that doesn't turn off when you have a virus or a pandemic. If anything, that just gives you more time to feed that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something like more than 150 million people in America identify as gamers, and they've got these stars through streaming. Like Ninja's probably the most famous. He's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated in the past.
Yeah, I'm dead. Yeah, that's bad. Blue tack! Blue tack! Out of a chest! A blue tack! What am I supposed to do? It's got range, bro. Though the reacted version will probably change colors as I get eliminations, but unfortunately I just got absolutely demolished because this guy pulls a blue tack!
And you have others like PewDiePie, who a lot of their audience are to the younger generation, but maybe now, with what's going on at the moment, is maybe just a little sign of what we can expect to see more of in 10 to 20 years' time, when these kids who have grown up idolising streamers. It would be very interesting to see what the landscape looks like in the years ahead, whether gaming dictates sport rather than the other way around.
As someone who's in the esports industry and the gaming industry, what does it feel like to have all this attention on esports when it's normally fixed elsewhere?
I think it's great. I think it sort of validates what we've all been working on, and it's now, I wouldn't say under the microscope, but people are more aware of it. People are spending more time on their computer and mobile phones, and that's where esports and gaming lives. With just a few clicks, you can be watching streams on Twitch, reading gaming guides on realsport101.com. So things like that. I think it's just really amazing to see. I'm not trying to get too carried away, because who knows, if this is over in a couple of months, then everything could sort of go back to what it was. But I think for us in the industry, it's very important to sort of capitalise on this new traffic for us.
Have you noticed anything with all these new people kind of coming into esports?
I think that one of the big success stories so far has been sim racing and Formula One in particular. So again, Gfinity, they've been running what they're calling the virtual Grand Prix, following the Formula One calendar that was to be. So in the ones that have been postponed or cancelled, they've been hosting that race online, with Ian Poulter's been representing one of the teams, with, I think, Kevin Magnussen, real-life Formula 1 drivers have been doing it as well. And I think with another company, Thibaut Courtois was taking part. He's a big fan of sim racing. So I think now it looks like brands are trying to meet different sports together using the gaming sphere. So there you go. You've got a footballer, a golfer, and a racing driver all competing on one game. And to be honest, I don't think people matter. They want to see these personalities competing. Okay, that can't be in sport at the moment, but gaming provides a fantastic alternative in these times.
It's a great point. I know NASCAR had a virtual version of their race, the Dixie Vodka 150.
Now, a network television first. A NASCAR All-Star race from the virtual Homestead Miami Speedway, delivered by iRacing.
They put it on Fox a couple Sundays ago, and it got almost 1 million viewers, which is pretty remarkable if you consider that it's, all virtual and just sim racing.
Yeah, it is really crazy. But we've seen in the past with Gfinity doing their esports equivalent under the Formula 1 name, and you've actually had drivers who've competed in Formula 3 competing in these, because I remember Karen Chandrop, one of the pundits who's also an ex-Formula 1 driver, he had a go on one of the sort of pods, they call it. And he just said, I spun out of the first couple of times, but it's got to the level now where it's just sort of driving a different car. And I don't know if you've seen the latest Formula 1 Drive to Survive series on Netflix, but Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly, they get ready for some of their races by plugging into the game, because you've got the course on there. Okay, there might be some differentials between what's on the game and in your car, but it's getting crazy levels to how realistic that things like that are becoming.
It seems like one of the big ideas that we're kind of getting from this is that athletes and gaming is only going to become more closely aligned, and the relationships are only going to be kind of strengthened.
Yeah, and I think the biggest story along these lines is probably coming from the NBA. So they are launching a players-only tournament on NBA 2K20, which goes ahead this Friday and will be broadcast on ESPN and features some of the best players in the NBA, like Kevin Durant. And I think when the NBA are taking this so seriously and bringing in their firepower, then it's getting pretty serious. And this is something that brands have to look at in this interesting time.
Well, it's also increasingly prevalent for football players to get involved in this as well. I mean, you mentioned Gareth Bale earlier. He bought his gaming team this year. So I imagine there are a lot of other players in football that are kind of looking at the NBA and looking to get more involved.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see if anyone makes the jump over to North America in their sports, because you mentioned Gareth Bale there, but other players like Mesut Ozil, Antoine Griezmann, Alessio Romagnoli, and Christian Fuchs, who has the best esports team name going, called No Fuchs Given. It'd be interesting. So they all own esports teams, right? And mainly in FIFA or Pro Evo or things like that. And so it'd be interesting to see if they start to branch out and look at Call of Duty players or even NBA 2K or Madden players to sort of cover all angles. And at the same time, if any of those players are coming close to retirement, to grow their profile in different sectors.
So what impact do you think this will all have on the esports industry and the gaming industry once the coronavirus pandemic goes away?
I think that's the big challenge for us working in the industry, is to convert this audience, to make sure that in a couple of months' time, when the new football season starts again or whatever, to make sure that at least a significant portion of this new audience sticks around. I think it's important that brands who are involved in the elite level of esports and gaming maybe break down the barriers a little bit. I kind of find that sometimes when you're tuning into streams of these obviously unbelievably talented esports stars, there is a bit of a disconnect, because one, you don't really know who they are, and two, you don't see them on such a regular basis. So I think bringing in stars from sports or celebrities to compete in gaming challenges, we've seen a little bit of that in the past with promo videos of Marcus Rashford going up against Stormzy in FIFA and things like that.
Come at elbow
Foul them. Hold your punch.
Hold your elbow.
Kick it in behind.
Clam.
Wait for me.
Right,
wait for me.
I'm waiting.
Finish it. No, wait for me. Aye!
That was dead. It
It was you as well. Flipping it.
I think bringing that to sort of a wider audience and putting on events involving celebs and football stars, or stars from sports in general, to put a bit more fun into esports. And of course, it'll always live seeing that top bracket of gamers compete against one another. But it would be great to see it's a bit more all-encompassing.
So if someone like myself, who isn't really into esports normally or gaming, wants to get involved, what's a good entry point that they can do so, or what would you tell them?
I think, of course, for one, you've got to be playing, picking up a controller, playing even if you don't have a console. There's plenty of games on PC now, and you can get controllers to cover what was on a PS4 or Xbox One. Your PC can probably deliver them just as well as a console. So that'll be your first step. Get playing, see what strikes with you. If it's FIFA, great. There's going to be plenty of content over the next few weeks and months. One point on that is that Euro 2020, which is being played on the PES 2020 game, they haven't made any statement about cancelling that. Qualifying is still going ahead, and it looks as if they're going to try and fill the gap left by the cancelled Euros this summer. So yeah, get playing, and then your next step is to go on streaming sites like Twitch, have a look at what appeals to you. You'll be very surprised that even watching hardcore esports games like Dota will be very addicting, because you can see just how unbelievable these people are. And if you're struggling at the game and want to get any better, come and have a read of our content on Real Sport or our friends at gfinityesports.com. They do a lot of guides on Call of Duty and things like that. I think it's just throwing yourself in there and trying to fill the void left by no traditional sports on our telescreens at the moment.
Noah Davis is a freelance football writer, and you can follow him on Twitter at Noah E. Davis for coverage of MLS and the U.S. men's national team. Alastair Pusinelli is the editor-in-chief of RealSport101.com, where he covers esports and gaming. This episode was produced by Hugo Chambray and John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend.